Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Happy St. Patrick's Day. We got a wonderful show for you, although probably a little short. Couple items of business before we get into the program. We have one new potential member this month in March. He haven't received his dues yet, but he's sent an application. It's Kevin Walton, N4RMF for Brian. And without him, that brings up the active member count to 43 members who are current on their dues. So we're getting there. Any other discussion before we go to the program?
Well, I've got a question for you. Since I live more than 75 miles away, I pay whatever it is I pay,
Twelve,
which I sent off to you, Doug.
1250, yeah.
Does that make me an active member or something else?
You're active.
Okay.
As long as he has your dues, the valid dues for wherever you live, you're active.
How can we tell?
Go on the website and on the far right hand menu, go to what's it called? I have to bring it up. But, member number, I think it is, and you can scroll down and find your entry, and it'll say either active or static.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, let's get on with the program then. I know that Madison's raring to go here. We'll stop the share on my part. Madison, you want to do any kind of an intro on this, or just launch right into the
Well,
video?
yeah, this is something that I did. I've been doing surface mount now for, I don't know, 6 or 8 years, and it's exciting, I guess. And at least when the nice part about it is when you do through hole stuff and you make a mistake, then it's kind of tough. Although I get into that, but surface mount is easy. You know, you just heat it up and boop, away it goes. And of course, then you got to find another one someplace, which is in this day and age pretty tough. This is something that I did with Steve Sparks, WK5S, in 2015. But it was pertinent then, and it's still pertinent. And, and my only comment going in is don't be scared because I could have done it on a wave soldering. Talk about one of the TDXS members is the one that got me into it, and that's Bill Bradford. I don't. He used to run a place. I forget where it was, out in the Park 10 area someplace, where he did boards by the gazillions, and he populated them and put them in a wave machine, and zap, there it was. Well, I guess that's easy. I guess it's easy. I don't know. I have set up a wave machine, and it does work. What I did was I found some El Cheapo oven at toaster oven at Walmart. I think it was about $12, and I found a hunk of Teflon someplace so I could put a probe in the back of it, so you can figure it out. By the way, for those of experimenters, when you do wave and you set your temperature, your initial temperature at say 325 degrees, because that's whatever you think it ought to be. It's exciting because the toaster ovens are really not insulated, it's just some metal and glass. And so the heat goes in and out, and that thing is charging up, and the next thing you know, it's 50 or 100 degrees cooler than it should have been. So if you're going to experiment with it, do not use the toaster oven. Learn how to do it first and get yourself some stuff, and then go from there. But that having said that, let me work on the getting this video up. And all of the videography was done by Steve. I'm only making the commentary, so let me get it up for you. Doug, did you see anything? Oh, Doug.
Doug, you're muted.
Well, did anybody see anything? Because
Yes, yes.
you did. Okay, okay. I'll
So
get
your
back.
file,
I'll get back to that just a second.
I'm curious what the letter to bank says.
Mm-mm. Not seen the video.
Yeah, Madison, is the video running on your end? We're not seeing it.
Unmute yourself, Madison.
Were we on?
No.
Nick,
Stop sharing.
Okay. Now what?
Go back into share.
Okay.
And select that desktop window. The upper left-hand corner.
Oh, I forgot. That's what I forgot.
Yep.
In the lower upper left. Yeah, screen. There we go.
And then click on the share in the lower right.
Okay, I'll start all over again.
Okay.
Thank you. Forgot that part.
There we go.
Hi, this is Steve. This is a picture of me, WK5S, and I'll be the cameraman. You won't see me anymore.
Hi, I'm Madison, W5MJ, and I'm going to show you a little bit about surface mount technology and how you do it. I'm here at Steve's WK5S Radio Shack, and we are going to get rolling on this.
Before we get started, I think we need an exercise to see how small little surface mount devices really are. This first picture is my left hand, and that white thing in between my thumb and first finger is a grain of rice, which I just got at random out of my kitchen. In the second picture, you'll see the same grain of rice and some little tiny thing underneath it. And that, which is about 1/10 the size of a grain of rice, is the surface mount resistor that I'm going to use for demonstration purposes. You'll be pleased to know that they come in several different sizes, and this is the biggest one. They come in a lot smaller than that too, so if you really get good and have a tiny board, well, you'll be able to figure all that out too.
The first thing I want to do is show you what you're going to need in order to get the job done. Because these things are so small, you're going to need something to help you see what you're doing. Otherwise, it'll be really tough even if you have good eyesight. For about $10, I bought one of these things, I believe at Harbor Freight, and as you can see, it has a magnifying lens here, it has a second magnifying lens there, and it has a third magnifying lens right here, which you can roll down and help you, at least with your right eye, see what you're doing. In addition to that, I have a 10 power glass, which I use, and sometimes you need it to see the work that you've done, because everything is so small. If you don't get a good bond, you won't be able to make your device work. So I'll show you the rest of the things I have here. In addition to the magnification, it's always nice to have something like this to hold your work. Particular board, which is typical size surface mount board, 1.5 inches or so square, has about 15 of these small devices. They're capacitors and resistors, which you'll have to put on. Of course, the larger items like these BNC sockets go on easily, typical underneath the board solder through solder holes. But these require a little bit more skill, and that's what we're going to be talking about, how you develop your own. The little brown devices here are capacitors. The black ones are resistors, and I believe from my own experience that's typical of how these are built. The capacitors do not have a value shown on them, but the resistors do. The capacitors come in the same length, but they are taller. In other words, if this is probably a 0.01 a picofarad capacitor, and the larger ones are the same width but taller. So make sure that you, prior to getting one populating on the board, make sure that you know exactly what you're putting on. If you have a capacitor checker, that's nice. I didn't bring one for this demonstration, but they're around, and you may have one without even knowing it. Of course, most people have multimeters that can measure resistance, and if you don't have one of those, you should get one because you'll need it for working with these boards for sure. The other things on that I have here in my kit, which are absolutely essential to the work that you do, we'll start with solder. The stuff that you use to repair plumbing is not what you want for this. This is all rosin coarse solder. The smaller it is in working for surface mount, the better off you are. This particular solder roll, and it should say on it what it is. This is about a little bit bigger than your hair, and I believe this is 0.2 inches, 20,000, 0.024 solder, which is about right. If you have bigger stuff around, you can use it, but part of the problem with small boards like this is making solder bridges, in other words, connecting more than one device when you don't want to. So use the small solder. In order to make it stick, you'll need a solder flux of some sort. What I have here is a flux pen, which is available at nearly any place that sells electronic stuff. The reason that this is good for using on surface mount is that it's gooey and holds those things in position. I'll demonstrate that in a little bit on how it makes it work. Okay. I personally like to use a lighter, no clean flux like this because I've done it before, and I probably have a few extra parts in case I lose one. Another thing that you'll need is something small to hold the devices. Right here I have some needle nose pliers, which, as you can probably see, are pretty small. They're too big. I don't use those except in a real pinch. What I use are tweezers like this, and I'm not talking about the kind that you use to pull out splinters. These are really tiny. I'll put them on that white piece of paper there, so perhaps you can see the size I'm looking at. These cost about $5 from any place where you can buy soldered flux. Another thing that you'll need is a knife, and the reason you'll need this is, I don't know, but you always need one, so I have one. Now, when you make mistakes, and you will make mistakes, you need to remove the device or reposition it after you've stuck it down and sideways or something like that. And you're going to need a way to take it off. What I use, the first line of defense there is what's called solder braid. I bought this particular one at Radio Shack for a couple bucks, and the way I'll demonstrate on how you make it work. But it absorbs the solder, and you'll be able to, hopefully, be able to remove your device. Another thing that you will need is something like this. This is called a solder sucker. I've seen them like this. I've seen rubber squeeze balloons with a tip on them that pulls it off. The reason you need this is because if you get solder in a hole where you don't want it, you have to pull it out. Otherwise, you won't be able to get your device that has a lead into the hole because it's got solder in it already, and the wires are rather thin. The way you work this is you push it in, you heat up whatever it is you're heating, and then you hit the button right here where my thumb is, and it goes zont, and hopefully pulls the solder out of the hole. You say, what's all this have to do with surface mount? Well, most of these things, and our little device that you looked at earlier, has something with leads on it. If you'll remember, the white BNC jacks have leads on the bottom which stick through holes, and when you're soldering in your little surface mount device, if you use too much solder, you're going to get solder in the hole, so you have to be able to pull it out. Now then, the last solder removal device I have is something called Chip Quick. I can't live without it. And what this does, I don't know exactly how it works or how it's made, but it looks like solder. If you look at the stuff down at the bottom here, it looks like solder, though it is kind of brittle, and if you try to straighten it out too much, it'll break. The other thing that you see in there is some flux of some sort or other, and the way you use it, what it does is to replace the solder with something which has a much, much lower melting temperature, and it keeps it liquefied while you remove the device with your knife or a tweezers or a screwdriver or your thumb or whatever you're using. This stuff I believe you can get at Fry's, although I get mine through Mauser or DigiKey because I use a lot more of it. And if you will find something on a board, and let's get into this one for a second, Steve. If you see these devices right here, these pin devices on the back side, underneath that IC there, you'll find that it has a bunch of feet. In this particular one, there are 12, and getting it off without something like Chip Quick means you have to cut it off, and then cut the feet off, then take the little pins out one at a time, which is not only time consuming, but you got to buy another one because you just ruined it. With Chip Quick, you can take it off all at once, and I'll leave it to you to figure out how that works when you get into a bind. Okay, the last thing in my kit is a biscuit pan. Don't use a cookie sheet because it doesn't have these edges that you see here on it. The reason that you have to have this on it as part of your kit is the little devices that you saw there that you pick up with your tweezers are going to go and fall off. They'll fall off your tweezers, they'll fall off your fingers, they'll fall off your hands, they'll fall off the board, and you need a way to catch them. Otherwise, they're on the floor, and if you are like me, Steve has tiles on here, so it's okay. But I have rugs, and believe me, every time we vacuum the rug in there, it goes thunka, thunka, thunka when the vacuum sweeper picks up all those little devices that I have dropped. And you say, well, that isn't going to happen to me. Well, I assure you that you're wrong, because it will happen to you. And with those tweezers, you can launch a surface mount capacitor into low Earth orbit without even knowing it. And you'll never find it. But a nice thing is if you have certain solid things in your shack, sometimes you can tell by the way it hits it where it went. Otherwise, you think it went to your left, but it really went to your right or bounced off the ceiling or something like that. And I'm not making this up. It really happened. If you'll remember, I promised Steve that if he had me to do the camera work, then I would build that watt meter kit. But
since we finished, he and I had been talking, and we decided that what we would do is desolder something using chip quick, and then he would let me off, and I won't have to build his watt meter anymore. So this is a heck of a deal. What I want to show you, if you'll remember, the chip quick came in a package which you've seen before, and it had a tube that has something that's called, well, I call it flux. I don't know what it is, but the way you work it is you take the stuff inside and you squeeze it on this device. I put a capacitor on here just for demonstration purposes, and I'm going to take it off because I got a lot of them. I've launched so many into orbit. Case was kind enough to give me a few extras. So there it is. There's the stuff on it. And what you do is take the solder-like stuff and you melt it on to wherever you are, as I'm doing here. Somehow it maintains a moist surface, and you see it's gone. I don't know where it is. I guess it's right there. There it is. Steve, can you get the capacitor?
Yeah.
All I did was put it on there and pop the little capacitor right off. Now all you have to do is clean this stuff off, and I've got a rag which will work. So I'm going to heat it up again like I'm doing, and I'm going to wipe it with my rag, and you'll see that those pads are clean again. Voila.
Voila.
What a deal. Buy some, and you say, oh, I'll never use anything like that. Well, I'll guarantee you, once you've used it, you can't live without it, because taking the solder off with solder braid or a solder sucker of some kind or another is just isn't nice. And this stuff is. And the little package probably costs $5, and I've had this particular one for a year and a half, and believe me, I've removed a lot of stuff. This was designed originally for taking off those ICs that have 1,000 legs on them and look like a little square centipede. And the technique is the same. You just put some of this stuff on there, put your iron on it, and it'll stay liquid long enough for you to pop it off with your knife or something else. So there you are.
So long.
Wow, chip quick.
Well, that's it. So now everybody wants to rush out and buy that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I'm strangely attracted to it.
Well, let's see. That was done in early 2015. I've been doing it for a year and a half at that point, so I must have started in 2013 sometime. And the first one is going to be a disaster. After that, why, we'd start with something easy. I refer to a fellow by the name of Case, and his name is Case Talon, and his call sign is K5BCQ. He has a gazillion kits, all in that sort of thing. Some very elaborate, some rather simple. But it's a good place to look. Just look up his call sign. He's on K5BCQ. He's on I don't know where, but if you go to QRZ, you'll get a direction to his kit website. He's always changing things too. And I built my first transceiver in 1954 off a schematic, which was nice because I worked for a parts house when I was a kid, and so things were cheaper, like nothing, and so I could get them. But Oh, I'm sorry. The first thing I built was a Heathkit AR1. That was in '54. I didn't build a transceiver until a couple of years after that. But I've been at it for a while, and I'm still learning stuff. It's still fascinating. And don't tell anybody this, but I would probably rather build things than operate, even though I lost all my logbooks prior to about 2000, and I've got 75,000 Qs since then. But man, I do like to build stuff. I guess it's the smell of the solder that makes me happy. Anyway, who's got questions that I can answer?
So if you
Not a
take
quick one,
Madison
Brian.
today,
You pre-tin solder pad on the boards. Do you tin your components at all?
Yeah, what you do is you got to clean your tip. I use a really fine tip. Let me start by saying back prior to 1954, I learned how to solder with a blowtorch. I'm not making this up either. We had a blowtorch. It had a chip on the thing that was bigger than your thumb. And yeah, if you've ever seen a blowtorch, it's got a little kind of a hook sort of thing, and you stick it through there and put it in there and heat it up. Well, I suppose that was, and I don't remember what I was building with that, but at any rate, the finest tip that you can get for your soldering iron is going to be, you're going to say, ooh, it's too big. So work it that way. But what you do is you take your I got to get the finger here. This is, let's say this is my tip. You take a hunk of solder and you go tsit like that, and that's it. Then you put it on a pad. Then you get your tweezers out there. Don't grip them too tight because it'll launch on you. It truly will. And then you put the device down, hit it with the end, and the first 50 or 100 times you do it, you'll do it wrong because you'll get too much stuff on there. But what you have to do is bring that soldering iron toward you while you're holding it down. And I didn't go into this, but I've learned that the best thing you can do once you've positioned it on the board with that gooey solder flux is use an X-Acto knife. They still make them, and they're good. And push it straight down on the device. Do not hold it with your tweezers, because while the knife can slip off, you can't launch the device with it. You can knock it off the board, but you can't launch it. So hit it a little bit, pull it sideways toward you, and then you will be about right. It's a lot easier than that. It really is. And I cannot describe the satisfaction of building something surface mount the first time you ever did it, and it works. Wow, what a deal. Also, it's, I'm going to say you can't let the smoke out, but I remember one time when I did, so I know it can be done, but it's a lot harder than with through old stuff. I don't know why. I don't see Keith in M5G here, but I will tell you a story about Keith, and it has something to do with components. We'd gone down to the Falkland Islands, and that was Keith's very first DXpedition. He's been on a lot of them since then. And he says, I don't know how I'm going to be able to work all this stuff because it's got those round dowel type plug-ins, and all I've got is the flat blade type plug-ins for stuff. Or that's what somebody said. And then all of a sudden Keith says, well, I have this little thing right here, and I put it in there. Well, it had been a long day setting up antennas and so forth, so I said, I'm going to go to bed in the next room. I lay down the bed. And Keith plugged it in, the whole thing into the wall, and all of a sudden there's a kaboom, and it almost knocked me out of bed. Well, as it turned out, that he had a capacitor in this little device that blew up. So that was Keith's first adventure with blowing up things. Certainly not mine, because I remember smoking things with that AR-1 that I built in 1954. But you know, when you build stuff that works, it just makes your day. It really does. And once you reach that certain age, and I am looking around here and I see some people who, like Roy, who have reached that certain age, uh, you know, it's a whole lot more fun to build electronic stuff than it is to bar hop or whatever it is. I mean, it just is. So there are some advantage. The only disadvantage to being older is that you only get to be so much older, and then it all stops. So have fun while you can.
Madison, I had a comment about when you were talking about harder to get the smoke out. What's not really obvious is that the active devices, especially, you can get them a whole lot hotter than you would think when you're soldering them. It's when they're operating, they don't like being that hot.
That's true.
My short story is Bob Seidler. We had some of the transistors, you know, like 200 watt, 150 watt HF or UHF transistors with the tabs on them and all that. Well, they're soldered through the board with the little gold plated tabs, and they were shorted. So he said, have you got your, not propane, but butane torch? I have a little jeweler's torch. And he says, light that thing up. So he's down inside this chassis, and there is so much smoke coming out of that. I cannot see anything but smoke. And he got them out and put the other ones back on again and worked fine. But like, you know, I would have gone, no, it's dead. So the point is, you know, you can get them hotter than you think might be appropriate just to get them soldered.
That's true. You can. The only problem is that if you get too much heat on those little boards, it's very easy to lift the traces. I've done that too. So,
well, and your point was it takes a lot less solder than you would think.
yes, that is. It only takes, you know, you think, oh, this isn't going to be enough, so you lather some more on there. Well, whatever you had on there was way too much to begin with, and when you put some more on, all it's going to do is get in the way or make a solder bridge or something.
Yeah, bridge right across the device.
You know, it is so, it takes so little to put on a device, by and large, that you won't believe it until you do it right a few times.
Think of the Grill Cream commercial.
Yeah, the little dab will do you. That's right.
Have you ever watched W6PQL's video about soldering chips onto the copper heat spreader?
No.
Well, you know, the heat spreader, this is for the kilowatt amps. We got a piece of copper about like this, and the chips about like that. And you put it on a hot plate in a cast iron pan and heat that sucker up to whatever it takes to melt the, you know, 600 degrees, whatever it takes. And you go, this is not going to work, but whatever it takes to melt the, you know, 600, this is not going to work, but.
We've got
Okay, anybody else got something?
echo going on.
What's that?
We have serious echo going on.
Oh, that's my fault, Dale. Sorry. Let me get out of there.
Well,
Just a
shoot.
sec.
I was listening to myself for like 15 seconds.
There we go.
And that was more than enough.
Got rid of it. But,
So what is the latest thing or one of the recent things you built with the surface mount stuff, Madison?
gosh, I don't even remember. I do those things all the time. I always building something. Seems I built something last week. I don't remember what it was.
You think it was, do you do more RF stuff than or digital or audio or?
Digital? I can't even spell digital without a
Okay.
crib sheet. Well, I don't know. Oh, it was something I had sitting around for a long time. I don't remember what it was now. And I thought I ought to put it together. I'll think about that for a minute. Gosh, I build stuff all the time.
I've got a microbit transceiver from India, and it's got well, most of it is surface mount technology, and it's various generations. I'm on generation 4 out of 6 or 7 now, and it has some spike problems and multiples and things like that. So they came up with some solutions. One of them is to replace one of the inductors with another inductor. This is a surface mount inductor. It's this little bitty thing, looks like a tick at the bottom, is one of them. This has stymied me for probably about better part of a year. I was just not wanting to tackle putting that little tiny 1210 size inductor.
You know, my experience was if it's not surrounded, if you can get towards one edge of it and slide it off that direction or whatever, that you can do it. But if it's down in the middle of other stuff, it's going to be pretty hard to get the old one out.
This should be dead simple. It's plenty of open space. I just have to cut a trace and then bridge it with this little inductor, which has 2 ends, opposite ends.
One of the things that I've done is use a piece of copper wire wrapped onto the end of the soldering tip. So I have, like a number 22 or 24 wire,
like a little whisker.
and use it for the actual tip.
That'll work. I think it was Roy. Somebody mentioned putting a sheet down on your rug or floor. That's a pretty good idea. I hadn't thought of that. But I've lost a lot of parts, and I wasn't kidding when you squeeze one a little too hard and you hear it clang off the ceiling. Who knows where it went? And if that's your last one, you're in trouble.
That's why I bought a carrier that has 10 of these things on it. Give you 10 tries at it.
Rick, that's a good idea about wrapping the wire on. I'll try that. But I don't know. I've got a gazillion soldering tips. I use a Chinese, I think it is, B52 soldering station or whatever it is. Costs $50. What a deal. Works great.
Yep. But that, what is it? Chip Quick is something that I looked on here, and you can buy it, I don't know, $15-20 for the kits. Is what they're selling for now. For just for the liquid stuff and then the wire.
Yeah, I use a lot of it. I bought that first package. It lasted me for a year and a half. Now I buy it in a much larger thing. And I remember the last thing I built was an interface for one of my K2s to the Hard Rock 50 that I use with it. And it's all surface mounts. It's a little board about, I don't know, inch by 2 or something like that. It's got 2 DB9 panel mounts, which are all through hole, but everything else, there are probably 10 little surface mount things on it.
I've been talking Zoom conferences with Zoom sessions with a couple of guys who have been making some amateur radio devices directed towards amateur radio operators, printed circuit boards with some surface mount stuff. And the reason when you buy a kit that has surface mount and the stuff's already there is the incremental cost to buy the chips and get them mounted is pennies once you get the board. So it's just easier for all of those people to buy the boards already populated, and then you don't have people like us trying trying to put the parts on and whining because it doesn't work.
In the last year or so, maybe it's longer than that. I used to buy wind keers, and I put those together for me and everybody else. I probably put 10 or 12 of them together, but they don't sell them in kit form anymore. I then, for those who know, the wind keers are fancy and expensive, but for cheap you can buy something called a Morty, and which works great. They cost like $15 as opposed to $100, so that's a nice thing. But they're all surface mount, but they're going away from kits, just as the K1EL wind keers are, I guess. Well, I don't know.
Well,
It's all fun.
yeah, I think that the part of it is that it's, if you make, say, 100 boards or 200, the cost of the parts to have them put on there, it's cheaper than trying to package them up. Can you imagine trying to take 3 of those little itty bitty things and put them in a package so that they don't get lost, and 2 of the, I mean, how many people, I'm going to do this the easy way. How many people have never built a Heath kit? So, okay, well, just, imagine taking everything down to 100th of the size and trying to package it so that people could find the parts in the first place. I think that's one of the reasons. It's just, it costs so much to handle the parts to get them in a package. Well, and I guess another thing that you commented, Madison, was that the parts are so little you can't put the value on them.
Well, that's true. Incidentally, that one that I showed right at the beginning, there's 1/10 of the size of a grain of rice, is big as far as surface mount is concerned. They go down a lot smaller than that. And all I can tell you is you buy those things in a strip. And I don't remember what it was. I think it was when I was working on the Hard Rock 50. I had launched the last one into orbit, and so I needed some more. And I went to the supplier of those kits, and he just cut off a tape that was probably 6 inches long. I don't know how many it had on. I only needed 1 or 2, but the thing probably had 100 on there. And I said, "How much do I owe you for this?" And he says, "Don't bother." He says, "The postage was more than the parts are worth," even though the strip probably had 50 of those dumb little things on. Well, you're right, Rick. How in the heck do you do it? When I worked for this electronics company, I remember one of the things we had to do was inventory stuff every so often. I think probably on an annual basis. And heck, I mean, when you're bringing in 1/8 watt resistors, those are gigantic compared to most surface mount stuff. So imagine what that would be like if you have to sell. I don't know how DigiKey or Mauser does it. I really don't.
If you guys are interested in any kind of small kits, this isn't mostly it's mostly through hole, but there's a lot of fun to build. Masters Communications has a bunch of different modem that will handle 9600 baud and its various interfaces, and it's a pretty dense board. It's about as small as I want to attempt.
It's like a DRA.
It's a DRA 50, yeah.
That's cool.
Works just great. A lot of fun to build. It's all.
You can, yeah, you can. That I was going to say, guys, that looks like a What's it, GCX? The little single band transceivers that are cheap, cheap, cheap. It's like $20 or something or other, and they may have one or two things populated on already. They'll put out 5 watts, and you can buy. The only problem with them is you got to wind toroids. Some people don't like that. I don't mind it. I've wound enough over the years, but they're pretty cheap.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Is that the people in Turkey? Is that where they come from?
Righto, that's it.
Yeah.
That's GCX, I think it is.
QCX.
QCX.
Here's one of the kits I haven't put together yet. QRP Labs. It's a British guy, I think, but he lives in Turkey. This is a QCX Mini. It's gonna be a real challenge.
There's a couple of guys that get together, the medical center ham radio operator guys that get together for lunch on Wednesdays, and several of those people, the guys in that group have built the QCX. Let's see, I guess, the minis. There's a couple of them. They're doing Whisper. They also do CW, but there's a couple of the kits that do Whisper transmitting, and a watt or two on 20 meters and a piece of wire in the attic. And Europe is easy. I mean, it's easy to get spots from Europe with that, but they get them all over the world with that on 20. It's cool. So like I say, I know those work. Interesting little project.
Madison, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Got a question for you. I've seen advertising for a vacuum pickup. It's just a tiny needle on the end of a support rod that has a vacuum pump hooked up to it. And it's got a constant vacuum on it, and you can use that on the small devices to pick them up and hold them rather than use a tweezer. Have you ever used one of those?
No, I never have. I thought you were going to talk about a desoldering thing, but no, I had not even heard of that. But it sounds like it ought to work. I don't know. I just if I don't know digital, why, you can imagine that I'm not an innovator.
I saw something recently about about $300 or $400 desoldering section tool like that you were talking about.
Well, those if you get a Heiko for $300 or $400, they're great. But there's a thread going on. I think it's on the Elecraft reflector about pace. So I had never heard of pace, but I looked them up, and they're like $600 or $800 or $1,000. Wow, you got to do some real volume to make that work. Makes chip quick seem pretty cheap.
Well, and you realizing, of course, if you have like let's just say a 40-pin package that's even just a dip package with a little close space pins on it, not even surface mount, but actual pins. You can't unsolder one of those without anything, with just regular methods. You got to have something with the vacuum, and otherwise you'll burn up the board and everything with it. But that's what's inside all the radios that we buy now. And that's why you send it in and they say, well, might as well just buy a new one, because it's going to cost you $600 for us to unsolder this. Never mind. I'm sorry.
I recently bought a little CW oscillator. It was $14 on Amazon, and I got it and assembled it, and I noticed that there was a crystal associated with this in the circuitry. I wondered what that was all about. Well, apparently one of the connectors is referred to as ANT, A-N-T. I thought, well, that's bizarre. Well, I finished building the thing and tested it out, and it was a lot better than the Vibraplex CW oscillator promoted by DX Engineering. This had a much better tone. I don't yet have volume or tone frequency control on it yet, but I figure I can figure that out eventually. But in hooking it up and plugging into a jack, 2 wires into the ANT jack. I played around with it a little bit, then I turned my radio on, and if you look very closely at the crystal, it says 7.023. And I tuned to 7.023, and there I was sending CW. Incredible. Quite a surprise. I don't know how many people, just build these things and use them and not realize that it's a little RF transmitter.
So it was advertised as just an audio oscillator?
Just as an audio oscillator, a CW oscillator, and no reference to the fact that it was emitting RF.
Oh, gosh.
It's only $14. Everybody ought to order one.
I guess if it's less than 100 milliwatts, it's okay.
Huh?
If it's less than 100 milliwatts, it's okay, I guess.
I suppose.
Dale, did you use RBN to see how many dB you were putting out?
Yeah, and that I might do that. I'll have to wait till the SFI is up around 300 or something, I'm sure.
Oh, it's headed that way.
You're going to have a long wait.
I'm sure.
No, I don't know. I've worked a couple of CWTs with 5 watts fairly effectively recently. I don't remember when, but within the last month.
Yeah, have you noticed that there have been some big hitters down on the QRP column?
I hadn't paid any attention, frankly.
Yeah, I think AA3B was there, and N5RZ even.
Well, I worked Gator last night, and he wasn't too strong. I didn't look his score up, so I don't know how strong he was, but he wasn't his usual blast. Although he was at 40 words a minute or something like that.
Yeah, I heard him somewhere where he was weak, but on the next band down, I guess it must have been 20 and then 40. He was his usual big self.
Well, as long as we're talking personalities, I caught him a couple of weeks ago with a bug, and his swing was so bad that I had to comment. So I sent him an email and told him he better put that thing back or practice a little bit more with a dummy load, because I could almost not understand him, and he was wailing away at 18 words a minute with his bug. But he told me that he was just practicing, so he gave it up. For those that don't know him, I don't know. Maybe he's not a TDXSer, I don't think, but he's been around. Ralph Bowen, N5RZ,
also known as Gator.
So Doug couldn't even stand his own show here. Where'd you go, Doug?
I was just pulling something out of the archives here, talking about low power and so forth.
Well, have you had any programs here about the little bitty VNAs that they're selling? I know lots.
I think
I've seen them in multiple places.
I think we did a year or two ago.
Okay.
Ruby did one, I think. Anyway,
Okay,
this
yeah.
is a Raspberry Pi 20-meter whisper transmitter.
Mm. Mhm.
It basically just on a Raspberry Pi, there's a little daughter board on top. It takes and smooths out the tooth waves that's coming out of the data ports. It's a
So
nice signal.
it's a transmitter.
It's a transmitter for our whisper.
The QCXs have you can buy a GPS receiver add-on board to it that during the quiet time between transmissions, it checks the frequency of the radio and the time.
Really?
Yeah. And so it will automatically adjust the time and the frequency of the transmitter.
Wow. That
There's a
guy's
ham
really
down.
sharp.
What was the question?
There's a ham down here in Clear Lake area. I don't know if he uses Whisper in this, but he's launched about a half a dozen balloons, and these are the circumnavigation balloons,
Mm-hmm.
and they only transmit during sunlight or in sunlight, but very 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 low power, and it's just I think it's just the ultimate circumstance that they're even picked up, and he gets a new location of his most recent balloon. It's pretty interesting. But
Some of those things have circled the globe multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's what I've heard.
You talking about Walter?
No, this is John Macca, AB5SS.
Oh, okay.
See, I know that what is it? Andy used to have some demos at the BVARC Hamfest, but they also had one of the little bitty ones the last time.
Yeah, Andy was heavily into the balloon activities. I went down to, I forgot the name of they renamed an airport down in Rosenberg. Something like
Wharton.
Intergalactic.
Wharton.
Yeah, it was Wharton.
Oh, it was Wharton.
Wharton,
Yeah. And I went down there a couple of times for their balloon launches. It was very interesting stuff.
Yeah, Mike N5MT used to participate in those things.
Say, Doug, there's your program down there. Dale's going to go down to Curacao. He can tell you all about it next month.
Okay, Dale, take a lot of pictures.
Do
Video.
what?
Take a lot of video.
Oh,
Take a
I'm
radio
I'm out of that business.
or take something that looks like a radio, and then you can take a picture of you standing on the beach with talking on the radio, talking to the radio.
Well, I got a couple of old mobile mics. I can take a mic down and stand out in the water and with the cord hanging down into the water and talking into the mic.
We believe a lot of things around here.
And a palm frond on the other hand for your antenna.
Hey, look, if they say it's the ocean, salt water is good for propagating RF. It's what the hell? All you need is a microphone cord to plug into it.
Have you guys? Well, maybe I they're still trying to get a QST article out of this thing, but what they did was the idea is propagation better when you're at the shore, in the water, just offshore, whatever. And there's been a lot of experiments about that. But what these guys did was they decided to use the Whisper reporting network. So they had little Whisper transmitters, and then they had thousands of people listening to them and reporting, as opposed to previous experiments where they've had transmitters and receivers and spent all kinds of money on receivers that they didn't need. So that was one of the interesting things really about using the whisper receivers where people are there all the time and the reporting to say, well, for instance, out on the Texas City Dike, you know, the long line, and then they get offshore, and the idea was they could actually see that the pattern of receptions spots got more aligned with the Texas City Dike as they moved out onto whatever. Oh well, all kinds of things that can be done with whisper and little bitty itty bitty radios and small antennas.
Well, all I know is that for a couple of years, the TDXS has been about 10, 12 years ago. TDXS went out to the end of the Texas City Dike to operate. And it's just phenomenal signal off of the end of that dike. Of course, we almost killed a few people with heat stroke, but it was
What
fun.
is it 5 miles long? Is that, or
Yeah, something like 5 miles.
it's
Yeah, about 5 miles. Yeah, we're out there, completely surrounded on almost all sides.
cool.
You know, as long as I've lived down in this area, I've never been out on the dike. I'll have to do that this year.
It's is it a city park or a county park? Whatever, it's a park.
They charge some admission, yeah.
Yeah, but lots of places to stop once you're out on it.
Well, I got another Zoom meeting I got to go to. My family, which is spread far and wide throughout the U.S., meets at 8 o'clock on Thursday. So I'm already 15 minutes late.
Tell us the meeting number and the password, and we'll be there too. Thank you for showing us the info.
Well, I'll be back next month to listen to Dale talk about going down to Curacao. Take lots of pictures, Dale.
You got a nasty side to you, you know?
Okay, well, actually, Dale, you see I'm wearing this C91TX shirt where you and I went. You can tell them about that one if you want. Anyway, I got to go. See.
Well, thank you, Madison.
Well, I think I do have video of Madison operating sideband at C91TX. Guess he's gone.
He's gone.
He
Yeah,
left.
somehow the family had a higher priority, and
Yeah.
we don't. Yeah, that's hard for us to understand.
Okay, okay, gentlemen. Well, anything else? Otherwise, we go adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, well, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, thank you, Doug.
Hopefully we can have
Good
another.
night.
I'm going to try to drum up somebody with a pair of K4s to do some sort of a review. I'm working on them.
A pair.
They're out?
Yes.
But yeah, they're out. They're in the wild.
Yeah. They're slowly coming out. I would imagine. I think they've ramped up a little bit on their production to get maybe a dozen out per week or something like that. It is improving, and I was on the list for about a year and a half, and 2 days before this past Christmas, UPS dropped off a box on my doorstep.
Yeah, I've tried to twist the Dale's arm, but he says he's still woefully under experienced on it. So
yeah, I'm there's history there. About 3 years ago, I bought a Flex 6600M transceiver, and I think at that time it was the top of the line transceiver for them. And oh gosh, I spent more time with my nose in a book in the manual trying to get the thing working.
it's only 275 pages.
Pardon?
It's only 275 pages or so.
Yeah, I know, but it was uh, it was it was just slow going, and I was getting to the point where just about every time I sat down, it was like I was sitting in front of a new radio, and something different came up. If I had antennas, uh, or I had it set up to use particular antennas for particular bands, I'd sit down the next day and it was seemed to be totally different. Um, I just couldn't keep up with the thing, and finally, I expressed my dissatisfaction to Flex, and they offered to buy it back. And so I sold it back to them. And then I calculated, okay, let's see, I bought this for X amount. They gave me Y amount for it on buying it back. And I had it for 8 months. I figure it was $80 a month rental of the radio. So I wasn't too unhappy with it. Unhappy with that aspect of it, but I was frankly glad to get it off off of my operating table. And the K4D, to my way of thinking, is a lot better. Seems to be more stable, and there are a lot fewer surprises, although there have been a few, and I still encounter a few from time to time. I'm still working those out and trying to figure out, all right, what do I need to do to make that work? And,
I noticed that the Bouvet expedition coming up, they're using all K3Ss.
oh well, yeah. In fact, K4UEE is heading up the PJ2T activity for the worldwide WPX sideband coming up, and that's what Madison and I are going down for. All of the radios there are K3Ss.
And just the comment is one of the reasons that they do that, I'm sure, is well, okay. Any one of the radios, pick one, any radio. If you set it up and have it operating on one frequency and one band, one band, one mode, whatever, and that's what you do with it, you're not going to run into the same headaches as you did with the Flex. You set it up, turn on, you operate it like we do in the field day or whatever, where you get things can really get confused with all the options is when you try to sideband, CW, digital, FM, whatever on 20 different bands and forget it.
Yeah, you're right. It's it's there are just so many variables in there in the mix of getting it on the air that it's hard to keep track of them. I find
I did
myself.
find it interesting, though, that for Elecraft have a premier presentation of the new rig.
Pardon me?
That would have been a premier use of their brand new K4 rig if they had supplied K4s to the expedition.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Do you want to bet? Do you want to bet the whole operation on new radio?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't ask a team on a major expedition to go through that. There is a learning curve to this radio, and for pretty much all the major premier radios of all the brands, probably there is a learning curve associated with it that just makes all other radios seem simple by comparison.
I always like my Heathkit 6er.
That and the was it the Communicator 2?
Yeah, that's it.
Gonset.
Still miss an old HW101.
Did the
Yeah,
sixer?
I tried to picture the surface mount technology that Madison was talking about with, comparing it, with radios, and I thought my DX100, what would that have been like if it was surface mount?
Well, it wouldn't have weighed 80 pounds.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it wouldn't have been the cat warmer that it was. My cat loved it.
Yeah, well, or the boat anchor that they are now. So Bill,
Yes, yes, sir.
did that one have the super regen receiver like the Tour?
It did. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it did.
My friend Wayne and friends Wayne and Jack used to talk to each other, and they'd CQ one crystal, call in CQ and tune in the band. And what he said was you didn't have to really tune because the super regen noise would change if somebody came on anywhere on the band. And then you could go find them.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. Times have changed a little bit since then.
Yep. Gosh. Oh, well.
My first QSO as a novice was purely by accident. And in those days, of course, we were all crystal controlled, and so you always tuned around after calling CQ, that sort of thing. Well, I had yet to get literally on the air, but the only way I could practice was to turn the transmitter on. But my Elmer told me, well, you can use a light bulb, a 100-watt light bulb, as a dummy load. And nobody's going to hear you. Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, and in those days, my Globe Chief 90? No. It was 5 watts. It was a 6AG7, single tube transmitter. But I could, with my Arc 5 receiver, I could, tune myself in, and there's my code practice oscillator. And I was practicing making QSOs and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, coming out of my receiver is this massive signal, CW signal, and he's sending my call sign, and he sent it about 3 or 4 times and signed his call sign. And I'm sitting there thinking, what?
Right.
Who is that? And ultimately, I decided, well, I'll go ahead and answer him, but I don't know what to say. And so I just went back to him and I told him, you're something like 394 or something like that. He was so severely off frequency, and I was afraid to try to tune him in for fear of losing him. Looking back on it, yeah, it had to be a 40/9 signal. The guy was only 2 blocks away.
What location was that? What city was that, Dale?
This was in Whittier, California. And he had been hearing me on the transmitting, and he wanted to know where I was and all this stuff. But his first question to me scared the heck out of me, because he said, he asked me for my telephone number. And I asked him, why do you need my telephone number? And he said, I want to call you up and talk to you on the phone. And so I thought, oh, I'm in big trouble now.
I've done it now.
And my dad came in and he said, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, it's going just fine, Dad. No problem whatsoever. Just having little practice here and blah, blah, blah. And he went away, and I wiped my brow thinking, oh my God, I'm in such big trouble. And so anyway, I give the guy my phone number, and he calls us, and I talked with him, and I explained to him what I'd been doing, and he said, "Well, you were getting out. I was hearing you, but I'm only 2 blocks away. But so I'm sure you weren't getting out very far. You have your light bulb is on your operating desk, so it's not
Right.
a great radiating system that you have going for you. But that was from my then novice point of view. That was an earth-shaking QSO. I just never.
That's cool.
I didn't think I was going to survive it.
I look back at my logbook and when I was a novice, and it's like, called this station, they didn't come back. Called that station, they didn't respond. Whatever.
Yeah, I had that same. I guess you had the feeling that this was official. You really had to, annotate, keep a true log of all your on the air activities.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
those were the
even
days.
mobile stuff. They hadn't relaxed the requirements for mobile.
Yeah.
So, and of course, before FM, I mean, not before total FM, but before anybody started using commercial two-way radios on ham bands. That didn't start until, well, let's see, I guess probably the early 60s, mid 60s, something like that. I'm almost as old as Bill is.
That's right. It's kind of like riding Mark's lot on your leg and mobile.
That's, oh yeah, or on your hand. Oh well.
Yeah.
Okay. I found the other day, or no, it was yesterday. I found my receipt for paying money to be able to use the auto patch.
Oh, gee.
That's a while ago.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
All righty, gentlemen, I'm going to bail out here. Talk to you all a little bit later.
Well,
it was good.
Thanks for joining in.
See you, Bill.
All right. Y'all have a good evening.
Okay, I'm going to shut this down, guys.
Good night, y'all. 73.
Thank you, Doug.
You bet. Good night.